We were just checking the sound there. Hi, I'm Cindy Crook, the Director of Marketing at Duncan Regional Hospital, and welcome to this month's DRH Live. Today I have with me John Webb, who is the Director of Security and Emergency Management here at the hospital, and he is going to talk about winter weather preparedness, which I know is really hard when it's 92 degrees out there and we can't even think about it being cold. But we believe in being prepared. So John is going to share a bunch of information. So welcome.
Thank you for having me. And
talk to him and tell us about it.
Well, again, just like Cindy said, my name's John Webb. We're going to talk a little bit about winter weather preparedness. Preseason preparedness and the right know-how is always the key to times. And just like Cindy said, our temperatures are still up in the 90s, and it's hard to even imagine that we'll be down in the freezing temperatures and our precipitation turning from rain into snow or ice. And so it's just around the corner. So being prepared is the key. So when we talk about precipitation, we talk about the rain and the types of precipitation in these cold weathers. I want to explain to you what the difference between sleet and freezing rain is. So sleet is ice particles that have already formed in the sky, and they've already fallen on the ground, and they accumulate on the ground as ice crystals. Our problem here in southwest Oklahoma is really freezing rain, because what happens with that freezing rain is it is actual rain that actually freezes on contact with objects as it falls. So this ice accumulates on our power lines, which causes some of our power outages here within the city. And the big thing is it accumulates on tree limbs, and the weight of those tree limbs then falls on top of those power lines, which gives us our power outages here in the city of Duncan. So let's talk a little bit about our local weather, and I want to be sure everybody knows the difference between a watch and a warning. What a winter storm watch is, it's that the elements are possible for storm elements to be in our area. The actual winter storm warning would be we actually have that precip falling and affecting us right now. Some of the things we don't really see here in our community is actually blizzard warnings. It is possible that we could have a blizzard warning here in southwest Oklahoma. What that requires is a heavy snow that lasts for 3 hours or more, and it's included in that is wind and wind gust in excess of 35 miles per hour. So you take that combination of wind and the combination of the snow falling, that's what gives us those blizzard-like conditions where you have a hard time seeing as you're driving, and maybe snow that is drifting up in different areas. So just wanted to be sure we knew the difference between a watch and a warning. Also, the frost and freeze warnings, of course, that just means that the temperatures have the ability to fall below that freezing mark. So let's talk about winter preparedness in your home.
John, can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Your weather conditions, when you talk about sleet and freezing rain and snow and all that, what would you consider probably the most hazardous? Is it a deep snowfall or more of the sleet if you were out in it?
It's more the sleet and the freezing rain. Of course, with snow is a little bit more coarse when it falls on the ground. So when it first snows, you have a lot better traction with your vehicle when you're driving. As you know, around here, we've had some pretty good ice storms, some pretty good snowstorms over the years. But once that snow starts to melt and then the temperatures drop below 0 at night and it starts to refreeze and it becomes ice or black ice, those are the real problems with us instead of the snow itself.
Okay, thanks.
So we're going to talk about preparedness in your home. We're going to talk about inside your home, and then if you have to get out and about in the elements, some of the things that we want to be careful about and look for when we're outside. But inside our home, to prepare, we want to be sure that we have at least 3 days of non-perishable foods on hand. And that could be anything from Spam or Vienna weenies or canned vegetables and fruits. It could be granola bars or fruit bars, bread, any of the meals ready to eat that you can buy at any of our outdoor sporting goods stores or military surplus stores. The meals ready to eat, the MREs, I always have a case of those on hand. I ate those when I was in the Army for about 10 years, so they stay good forever. Not always the best tasting stuff, but they'll do in a pinch. Big thing with stocking up on water, of course. The recommended stockpile of water is a gallon of water per person per day. So if you have a household of 4 or 5 people, you want to be sure that you got 20 gallons of water sitting around just so you can have that nourishment. Sometimes things that people forget about when our weather has made us aware of storms coming in. We want to be sure that if we're taking medications, that we have 3 days of medication on hand as well. Be sure we can take care of those health problems that we might have.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
The water or even the medicine, I mean, how long do you go back and check it? So if I put water in the closet today, but we don't have a bad storm till December of 2020, do you have a recommendation, like should I go every 3 months and change the water out, or?
Well, so that all kind of goes back to the preparedness. And of course, water actually has a shelf life when you buy it. Here at the hospital, to get away from checking that water every year, we've actually gone to what they call a 50-year water. So it's a canned water and it's good for 50 years. It's kind of pricey because you're paying for that shelf lifetime, but all of your water, whether it's distilled water, whether it's drinking water, it all has a shelf life and an expiration date on it. My recommendation would be to check that about every 6 months, just to be sure to rotate that out of there.
And the same with your medicines?
Medicines are a little bit different on how you store that stuff. And to be honest with you, I'd have to look into it. I don't know that when you get a prescription that it actually has an expiration date on when that medication actually expires. And of course, it's going to depend on how you're storing it. Are you storing it in a warm, dry place out of the sunlight? So there's going to be some variables in there when it comes to medication. And you can always visit with your pharmacist when you're getting those medications filled or picked up and ask what their recommendation is on what the shelf life of that medication might be.
Thank you.
Want to be sure that you have a portable battery-operated radio. They do make some radios out there, and I actually have one that I keep in my car, but it's actually a crank radio. It doesn't require any batteries, and you can crank the thing up, and it has power. But that way, just in case you had batteries and you use the extra one for the old remote control or whatever the case may be, at least with these crank radios, you have the ability to crank that and listen just in case the power's out, and stay up to date from your local weather, what's going on. Flashlight and batteries, always. LED lighting is always a good thing. Battery power. The hospital was gracious enough several years ago as a gift to all of our employees for working here. They gave us a LED battery operated lantern, and I've used that several times. It's really come in handy. It's always good to have sand or rock salt on hand to be sure that you're able to get that ice off of your steps and your sidewalks. Shovels for of course the same difference. A big thing is we want to be sure that heating fuel. We don't really have inside the city limits of Duncan, of course, just about everybody is on natural gas, but we do have folks, and you folks live out in the rural community where you're relying on propane. So you want to be sure that your fuel source, it could be propane, it could be firewood. You could be living in a house that you're still heating with firewood with a wood-burning stove. But once you get those watches and those warnings and paying attention, you want to be sure that you have plenty of your fuel source to keep your house warm if needed. You also want to check your smoke detectors and your carbon monoxide detectors as well. And we want to be sure that if you're without power and you're using generators, that we're not bringing those. I know it sounds like it's common sense stuff, but you don't want to bring those generators inside the house. You don't want to have those generators running inside your garage. You don't want to have them running right outside your door for ventilation and carbon monoxide. So you always want to be sure that you're paying attention that when you're using generators that they're outside in a well-ventilated area. And that brings into mind also with generators and fuel, want to be sure that you have a good up-to-date working fire extinguisher on hand. We're using candles inside the house. Those are fire sources, ignition sources. So be sure you have a good fire extinguisher and a first aid kit on hand as well.
I'm sorry, regarding generators, is there a certain size that you would recommend? I mean, I'm sure they come in different sizes. I don't think people get the generator to do everything in their house.
They most certainly don't. And of course, it depends on the type of generator, the size of the generator. And I certainly don't have any recommendations as far as the size of generator. It all depends on what you're trying to run and how long you're going to run it. But all of your local retailers that actually sell these generators, they would be the person to ask as far as what the load is, what I can use, how long maybe the battery or the fuel is going to last. But you don't want to put a bigger load than the generator is able to provide as well. So whenever you buy those, whatever brand it is, ask your retailer what the specifications are of that generator. And one thing I don't want to forget when we talk about at home, let's not forget about our furry friends. Let's not forget about our outside animals. Let's be sure that they have shelter. Let's be sure that they have plenty of food and water, and that we're checking that water and changing that water out. If it's possible, just because we talk about winter storms doesn't necessarily mean we're going to be without power, but it could be that you're unable to travel. As you guys can probably remember, I think it was 2010 when we had the big ice storm where it closed everything down. travel was just hard to do. So we still had power in some areas, but you want to be sure, even if it's a light bulb, we want to be sure we're taking care of our furry friends out there and be sure that we're not forgetting them with winter preparedness as well. So that pretty much covers things inside the house, but let's talk about if we have to go outside the house to do things, whether it's shoveling snow, removing ice, taking out the trash, or just out there having a good time with a sled, building a snowman, having a snowball fight. We want to be sure that we're layering up on our clothing. We want to be sure that the more layers, the more insulation that it creates, the better your body's able to maintain and keep that heat. And if you have as much hair as I have on my head, you want to be sure that you have a cap to keep that heat in. A lot of your heat is lost through your head, so you want to be sure that you're wearing a cap. Be sure that you're covering up your digits, your fingers. Be sure that you're wearing gloves. And a lot of things people don't think about. If you notice when we look at videos from Chicago and Minneapolis and New York, you see a lot of folks that are wearing the scarves. Well, that's done for a purpose. You want to be sure that you're protecting that cold air going in and out of your lungs. So that scarf over your nose and your mouth really helps you protect your lungs. Big thing is outside, you don't want to overexert yourself. A lot of people forget how much work it really is to get out there and shovel a driveway. And along with that, as far as overexertion, you want to be sure you're staying hydrated. Just because it's not hot outside like it is now, when you're out mowing the grass and drinking lots of water and Powerade and those kind of things, you want to be sure you're staying hydrated during the cold weather as well. You're sweating inside those clothes and you're working really hard. So some of the things we want to look for, though, when we're outside, we want to be sure of a couple of medical emergencies that are out there. We want to be aware of hypothermia. We want to know what we're looking for when you start experiencing signs and symptoms of hypothermia. And that normally happens. Your normal body temperature is about 98.6. Hypothermia actually can start when your core temperature falls below 95 degrees. So some of the things that you're looking for there, that uncontrolled shivering, that shivering is your body's natural reaction to creating heat when it's cold outside. So it's different to be cold and kind of have the shivers, but when you have that uncontrolled shivering that you just can't stop, that's a pretty good indicator that, hey, we probably need to get out of the elements and get in where it's cold. Disorientation, that kind of happens a little bit later on, but sometimes we become confused when we're outside. Loss of coordination, fumbling, stumbling around, maybe loss of memory, and dizziness or drowsiness. Those are other signs and symptoms of hypothermia. So if you start experiencing this stuff and just want to get out of the elements, get in the house, and start to gradually rewarm yourself. So that's basically it for
I know you're not a doctor.
Correct.
But hypothermia, you said get inside. So if they go inside, is there a certain time that maybe they need to go to see their doctor or something if the symptoms don't go away? So
with hypothermia, it should start to go away. But if not, if you start experiencing the signs and symptoms don't get any better, or they progressively get worse, that confusion, doesn't get better, that shivering doesn't get better, always recommend, it's always better safe than sorry, and take yourself to the emergency room or one of the local care providers and get checked out.
Are you I couldn't remember touching about frostbite?
Yeah, that was the next thing I was going to talk about was just frostbite, which is the most severe. And basically frostbite occurs either in your fingers, your toes, your earlobes, tips of your nose. We don't have a lot of fat and a lot of muscle in these areas, so they become cold very, very quickly. The circulation's still there, but they don't have like your arm, your belly, you don't have anything holding that heat, that body heat in for you. So once you start feeling, having that loss of feeling in your fingertips, your toes, or your ears, sometimes your fingertips will turn blue or they'll get pale, same thing with your toes. Mm-hmm. Also, you have what they call the red, white, and blue syndrome. Once you start experiencing the early signs of frostbite where your digits are actually frozen on the ends, they'll turn a really bright red, or they can turn a white or bluish color. They can also turn a yellow color and almost look hard and waxy as well. And that's those extreme out in the cold for long periods of time, and those digits are actually becoming frozen on the tips of those digits. So, and also after you get out of the elements and you start gradually rewarming through water or just the heat, and you start seeing blisters form in those areas, the first thing you want to do is you definitely want to seek medical attention. Once you start seeing those blisters and the discharge from those areas, pain, or they become swollen, and you might even start running a fever. But if you have any kind of new or unexplained symptoms, you definitely want to seek medical attention and get those looked at as well.
And you'd also think of your furry friends too, because they can get frostbite.
Absolutely,
paws.
you bet. Absolutely, good point. Absolutely. So let's talk about winter preparedness and getting ready for it in your car. You know, we're a mobile society, and we have to go to work and take kids to school and that kind of thing. So we want to be prepared. Be sure our vehicle's prepared as well once these watches and warnings come out. So with your vehicle, it's that common sense stuff. You want to be sure that your battery's able to stay charged. You want to be sure that you're checking all the fluid levels in your car. Check your tires. Be sure they're not dry rotted. Be sure that they're properly inflated. Be sure that they have good tread. You want to check your wiper blades. You know, people don't think about wiper blades in the winter. They just think about them in the summertime to get the rain off the windshield. But if they're not in use, they can become dry rotted and cracked and not remove the snow off of your windshield like you need. Be sure you check your lights. Why lights are important, so of course, so you can be seen even during the daytime hours when it's snowing. The headlights and the tail lights and your emergency flashers are extremely important to be seen. Be sure that you have a functioning jack in your car, and be sure that you have a spare tire. Check that spare tire as well. A lot of people, I've stopped to help people change flats, and we get the tire off the ground, put the spare on there, and drop it on the ground, and guess what? It's flat as well. So you want to be sure that that you're checking that spare tire as well. Big thing with winter weather, fuel. Be sure that your car is full of fuel. That does a couple of things. Number one, it gives you the fuel you need just in case the power goes out and you're unable to get gas. But a key thing is gas tanks with the changes in temperatures, they can create moisture within your gas tank as well. So the more gas you have inside your gas tank, the less moisture that can form and maybe cause your car not to start. So you just want to be sure that your car is full of gas as well. Travel only if you have to. You know, if you're watching those watches and warnings and there's travel advisories in place, they're put in place for a reason. So if you don't have to get out, just don't get out. Avoid driving at night. If you are driving and you have to get out, try to drive in high traffic areas, especially if you live out in the rural communities. Don't get on those side roads and take those back roads to work. You want to stay just in case something does happen where it's high traffic areas where somebody could stop and help you if it was needed. The other thing is, if you don't have to get out and you're out, you're putting everybody else at risk, not just yourself. You're putting our first responders at risk as well. Our ambulance drivers, our firefighters, our law enforcement that are out there traveling. And if you're involved in an accident or something, now they're having to put their lives at risk as well to get to you and give you the help you need. So if you just don't have to drive, don't just get out and sightsee and take a look at what's going around. If you don't have to get out, just stay home. If you're planning a trip and you have to go somewhere, tell others where you're going. Tell them what time you're leaving. Give them a phone call when you get there. Tell them what the route is. That way, if you're not there in a reasonable amount of time, when we call the Highway Patrol at star 55, you can let them know this was the route that this person was taking. They should have been here by now. We haven't gotten a phone call. It gives the Highway Patrol a good starting point of where to look and how to look as well. And try not to travel alone. If you can always take a buddy with you or a family member with you during this time, always try to bring somebody with you just in case you're on off the road. There's two of you. Just in case you need some help. So, and have an emergency kit in your car. Some of those things, be sure that you have an ice scraper out there and a broom. One thing you want to remember when you're getting ready to travel as well is be sure that you're removing that snow off the roof of your car, off of your tail lights and your headlights of your car. Be sure that snow's taken off of there. Be sure you have de-icer. De-icer not only for your windshields, but if your car lock gets iced over and you don't have one of the fancy little buttons, you can spray that de-icer in your car lock and be able to get your key in there to unlock your door. Tow chains, jumper cables, shovel, road flares, sand or cat litter, just in case you run off the road. You have that ability to use that sand or that kitty litter to get some traction. Kind of like at home as well, you want to have flashlights. You want to have spare battery chargers. We always keep a somewhere in my preparedness box here, but this is an external battery for a cell phone. Be sure you have one of these charged up in cables in your car, just in case your car battery dies and you're unable to charge your phone. You have a way to charge your phone that's inside your car as well. Hand warmers, they always come in handy. And people think we keep a candle and a lighter in our to-go box. If your car was to die, you ran out of fuel, it's amazing how much heat a candle can actually put out for you. But if you use a candle in the car, you want to know that it's an ignition source. You want to be sure that you're cracking the windows to be sure that you have good ventilation in and out of your car. And of course, a first aid kit as well inside your emergency kit for your car. So now that you've got all the needed stuff inside your car, and we've called the people we're calling to tell them where we're going in the route, let's talk about what happens if for some reason we're stranded. We hit a patch of black ice, we get sideways, we run off the road, and we're by ourselves. Let's talk about what the right thing to do is there. If possible, if you ran off the road, of course, you're not going to be able to decide where you're going to pull off. But if you have vehicle troubles or you can't see, be sure we're pulling off to the right side of the road. You do want to be careful as you're pulling off. Pay attention to the shoulders if you can see them. We don't want to pull off into the wet grass and create a problem and become stuck. But we do want to pull as far to the right as we possibly can. And once you're safely pulled over to the right, call somebody. Call for help. Let them know where you're at. Tell them what you need, and they'll get people started that way. The other thing is turn on your emergency flashers. We want to be seen. If you have warning triangles in your car and it's safe to do so, get out of your car and put those warning triangles out so somebody doesn't run into the back of you. If it's at night, people don't think of this, but turn on your interior lighting so you can be seen, so it glows inside the car so you can be seen. People get to looking for it. It's really just going to improve the visibility of you and your car. Some key things to remember, once you run off the road, you always have to remember that if you don't see any buildings or any light, stay in your car. Don't get out of the car. Don't try to go walk for help. Don't try to walk to the nearest house. It is kind of deceiving when it's dark and you look off in the distance and you see a light and it doesn't look that far, kind of like looking at a mountain. I can climb that till you start climbing it. It's the same thing when you see lights in buildings. If you can't see lights or buildings, don't try to get out of your car. Don't try to walk to it. What happens is, especially if it's snowing, when you get out of your car, it's real easy to become disoriented. If it's snowing and you walk away from your car, you have no idea what your sense of direction is. Even if you get part ways down the road or a field and decide, I'm going to turn around and go to my car, this is further than I thought. It's so easy to get disoriented and get turned around and not knowing what direction that you're walking. So if you can't see a building, you can't see light, stay in your car, wait for help to get there. Of course, if there's heavy snow, regardless of what you can see, you don't want to get out of your vehicle as well. Do remember that you can run your car's engine intermittently to keep your battery charged, to keep the heat going. You just really have to be careful with all the accessories that today's cars have with plugging in cell phones. They draw a lot of current. So if you've got your cell phone plugged into the cigarette lighter, keeping it charged, it can really create a draw on your battery. So you want to look at the dimming lights and that kind of thing. And just be sure you're starting your car intermittently to stay warm and to keep that battery charged up. And again, if you're using candles or got quite a few people in the car, make sure you're cracking those windows every now and then, just to be sure that you have some good ventilation, some good fresh air in there. So big thing is while we're driving, you want to be aware of your surroundings and your location. We are creatures of habit, and we don't really pay attention when we're driving from here to Oklahoma City. We get to talking and visiting, and we're not really paying attention to where we are. We're not paying attention to those mile markers. We're not paying attention to those landmarks. When I talk about landmarks, it could be the Norman exit going from here to Oklahoma City, or a mile marker, or the McDonald's and the gas station. You need to have a pretty good idea as you're driving in bad weather of where you're at. Just in case something happens, you're able to provide that information. It gives, again, law enforcement, first responders, a good starting point and any point where to look for you. Okay, that's basically all I have for you guys. Be happy to answer any questions that you have, and I know that's not the tell-all and the end-all of everything preparedness, but those are some of the things that I think are important and I think would be beneficial to you and your family when preparing for the winter weather that is just around the corner and just ahead.
So talk just a little bit about Duncan Regional, just to kind of let our audience know that we at the hospital, we're prepared, right?
We are prepared. We have lots of plans and policies and procedures and preparedness to guide us, and it's a guidance, but to guide us in the right direction to help us continue to provide care to the community, whether it is something as bad as the power going off and our generators are in place to keep us powered up and going, whether it is making arrangements for, if we're snowed in, being able to feed and provide nutrition and water and the equipment. We have emergency plans in place with our outside vendors to be sure that we're able to get the supplies that we need. We have good working relationships with all of our law enforcement local law enforcement partners, our sheriff's office, our emergency managers with the Stevens County Emergency Management. We have plans and procedures in place with the MERC, which is our Medical Emergency Response Center, and our Regional Medical Preparedness Group to provide us with emergency supplies or personnel just in case something happens. So we try to be very proactive, and we drill on a lot of this stuff to be sure that we're prepared, and we do everything we do to be able to continue operations and take care of our community.
So if it is bad weather out there, but do we want people to come to the hospital for shelter?
Well, so that's always a sticky question. We don't want to turn people away, but you have to realize that this facility and our patients that we have inpatient, they're our priority. And being able to provide, I don't want to say the comforts of home, but being able to provide that electricity and that heating or cooling, that food, that water, we have to take care of what's here first. And of course, the hospital is a community partner, and we're going to do everything that we can possibly do that's reasonable to support our community. But our first priority is to take care of our patients that we have here at Duncan Regional Hospital.
Okay, great. Well, the reason we did this is because it is National Preparedness Month.
Yes, it is. I'm glad you reminded me of that. I forgot to mention that.
Yeah, so that's why we did it. And there is a website called ready, ready.gov that you can go to that will have a lot of the information that John has shared, and maybe lists and some tips too. But John, this was great. You gave us a lot of information, and we really, really appreciate it.
Well, I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you. And so stay tuned to see more information coming up for next month's DRH Live. Thank you.
See ya.